Okay, so hello everyone, and welcome to this first chapter of The Work of Art. The Work of Art is our series of online dialogues around art, its working processes in terms of creation, production, and labor, within the framework of the Smart Places project. My name is Julia Morandeira, and I'll be moderating today's conversation together with Johanna Burton here and Itziar Barrio, which this conversation is taking place against the backdrop of the exhibition they've just done together, titled By All Means, which will open tomorrow here at Azkuna Zentroa in Bilbao. So just to give you a bit of information about the project, Smart Places, it's a project gathering 8 cultural institutions and 2 universities from 8 European countries around the shared task of audience development through digital strategies and new technologies. The partners involved are Dortmunder U from Germany, the Musée de Picardie from Amiens in France, Ville's Contemporary Art Center in Brussels, Belgium, Etopia Center for Art and Technology in Zaragoza, Spain, the Van Abbe Museum in Eindhoven, the Netherlands, ZKM Center for Art and Media in Karlsruhe from Germany, Liechtenstein National Museum in Vaduz, Birmingham Center for Media and Cultural Research from Birmingham City University, Oulu University of Applied Sciences in Oulu, Finland, and finally Azkuna Zentroa in Bilbao, Spain, where we're standing today. So this project, and more specifically the conversations called The Work of Art, will take place triennially from now, February 2019 until May 2020. It's a program consisting of live stream conversations, consisting of a brief Q&A streamed through Facebook Live, and each of them will be hosted in a different Smart Places partner, engaging with different speakers connected to the context hosting each dialogue, be that programming, the exhibitions, the city, or even the architecture of the institution hosting the conversation. The idea behind this initiative is to open up a different interface of the institution to summon other audiences, enabling them to virtually connect with the agencies and the processes that craft the fabric of the art world, its professions, its institutions, its methodologies and logics, as well as its conflicts and much more. So to take part of the conversation, you just have to send us your questions through the Facebook stream by using the hashtag #TheWorkOfArt. Well, now, it's a true pleasure to have you both here as the first guests in this inaugural session, in which we would like to further explore and discuss, taking also the occasion of the show that you've made together, to reflect on what does it mean, this collaboration between artists and curating in the exhibition making. So maybe a first question to start would be to ask you, how did you start working together for this show, for the show By All Means? You want to start?
Sure, I'm happy to start. It's a pleasure to be here and to be in conversation with you both here. We've been installing for the last few days, so if we were already, I think, in sync in terms of working together, we're even more so now. Itziar and I are both engaged in an art world that's both local and global, and there are kind of ways in which you find each other in terms of interests. My own background is heavily focused on feminist practice and performance practice. Itziar also, I think, is locatable in both of those areas. And through kind of 6 degrees of separation, we found each other about 3 years ago when there was a really wonderful show put on at Participant, which is an important alternative space in New York. And we started working together then on the project that actually is up now, which we just finished installing about 5 minutes ago.
Definitely. Yeah, I don't think I have much more to say. It's just like, the collaboration started like, as Johanna said, like, 2 years and a half ago, and has been taking place through our living both in New York and meeting over time, but also a very intense week of work here and a lot of discussions around the topics conceptually, but also the display of the exhibition. Yeah, and coming from the same interest that we have in the sense of the same things.
So Itziar, how would you describe the role of collaboration in your practice, also taking in consideration this show that you've just produced?
Yeah, well, this show is an example of that, because working with a curator for me is a dialogue. I mean, I'm not the kind of person that is just gonna do whatever with my work. I like to have a dialogue with almost anything. So of course with curators that I work with, but specifically this exhibition has been designed in collaboration of all of us, Johanna, Burton, projects, and Ken Saylor and me. And that will be one specific kind of collaboration that is reflect on the display. But also, I mean, in each project I have many collaborators. Like I don't know, I show here like 4 projects, and there are like from performers to historians, writers, musicians. So I mainly collaborate. It's like a big thing in my practice.
Okay. And maybe also thinking in a much more broad context of what is curating and what is artistic practice, how do they come together, where do they intersect? Johanna, you're also director of the education department and of also audience development at the New York New Museum.
Yeah.
So could you actually discuss a bit further what is curating in your practice,
Sure.
which actually bridges between the educational, but also rethinking the institutional in your position?
Sure. I mean, I'm in a really unique position at the museum I work in that education is not seen as a supplement to exhibitions, but actually kind of the core of what a museum should do, which is to be thinking about questions that maybe are pertinent to the immediate context of the museum, but also to culture at large. So most of the work that I do, and I think this is applicable to the show with Itziar, thinks about art not as something that is static in a space that somebody comes and is sort of impacted by, but is a mutually reactive space that changes both the artwork and the audience. I think that it's interesting with Itziar's exhibition to think about the way in which pedagogy and education is pretty much, I think, at the core of all of the work in various ways, just opening things up and saying what's behind the thing you're looking at, or how was this thing made, or how might we understand something about filmmaking or performance or production differently. So, you use a lot of very accessible references like Adele, right? Or movies or plays like Streetcar Named Desire that we think we know, and then you open them up and turn them. And that's a process that I feel very familiar with in terms of thinking about many audiences who come with different levels of engagement and being able to meet them in different ways and be exciting. I also think art should make you a little uncomfortable, which rather than just be another spectacle to consume. So hopefully I think we make some people uncomfortable here in a good way, in a positive way.
Really, already? You know that?
I hope so.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
Both of you are stressing a lot the component of the local, both in both your practice, and that gives also an idea of how a practice is rooted or is situated to take cue from a feminist genealogy, no, or a position of how you inscribe your own practices. Can you maybe discuss or comment more on that? How does your practice as an artist, for example, is affected by, but also affects your context in which it's inscribed, or where you live also?
Well, for me it's very important always to work from the local, or even the things that affect me and that I can affect, I guess. But I think it's also the way how you can communicate, no? With others, to work by proximity. That can be intellectual proximity, that can be by science, that can be by anything, right? And also I follow the thoughts that the contemporary mythologies are embedded in pop culture and cinema culture that we all share, like as a common knowledge, and that, of course, is part of the capitalist system we are living, right? The only one thought that they're trying to create, right? And one of my goals is like to rethink all those structures and manners and displays. So I think that makes sense with the local.
Yeah. You want to add something?
I mean, I can just say that I entered the art world because I wanted to be part of a dialogue that felt really exciting and really urgent, and I believe that art is a place where politics actually get grounded, just because you can see things differently, and the power of the symbolic seems at the root of any kind of radical change. It's a hard moment as an American to think about some of the kind of current climate, and I think really for anybody globally too. So the idea of the local really is a way of saying you're part of a very finite group of people, and there are many other finite groups of people that are also part of a larger community, and that gives me some hope, I guess. Somehow.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Yeah.
We have some questions from the audience online, the online audience. So Carla Crespo Jimenez is asking a question I think addressed to you, Johanna. What evolution have you seen in the work of Itziar during these 2 years that you have been the curator of the work?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
I think what's been really nice is Itziar and I have a really easy working relationship, but I'm not saying every good curatorial artistic partnership needs to be that way. Ours has been. I think that what has been nice, though, is that the ease of our being able to talk has allowed us both to negotiate really easily.
Yeah.
So there have been moments where each of us thought we knew what something should look like, and then we trusted the other. So I think that this is an exhibition that has marks of both of us doing things we might not do on our own, which has been really nice. And in terms of your project, I think it's the first time you've been able to see this much work all together and to think about it as an environment. So you've let yourself, I think, loosen up the boundaries a little bit between projects, and that's been exciting to see. And also, I think for a project like this, you have to be very legible. You have to be super clear about what each thing is that that an audience is going to, because the projects are complex. So I think that's been great to watch. And there's a lot of blue, so that's new.
Do I answer that?
Why is there so much blue?
Well, the blue actually, thinking about design and how to bring signs that could help, structure the work and the display and the concepts we are working with. We came up with blue as a reference to filmmaking and also a reference to fiction and the possibility of things to be others, right? That actually my work deals a lot with. And yeah, I'm bringing that mechanism. So yeah, the blue, we all know that blue and the chroma key is that possibility. So. Yeah.
So we do have another question from Aurélie Maguet. I think also addressed to you, Johanna. Do you find the relation between education and art very different in America from Europe?
That's also a great question. I actually think I might have more affinities
Also for you.
with my European counterparts.
Yeah.
American institutions tend to keep education departments quite separate from curatorial. I work in an institution that's an exception rather than the rule. But we were just talking today about actually a pressure that I actually feel is coming from artists who want to be in dialogue, who want to be within the community of the museum, who want to spend time with community partners, with school partners. And so in a way, what's a relief is that artists are asking for these structures, but I feel that there's more of these structures in Europe, actually. At least the people that I know that are working this way tend to be...
Well, definitely there's a pressing urgency of not just reducing the collaboration with artists and institutions and curators to, for example, shows or these types of formats, and to invent other formats in which the knowledge production can take place also in museums, right? Maybe also there's a question that, related to the previous one that I find very interesting, and that I think it's very also specific to our working context, which is how we work with affects. You mentioned that it's true that, the curatorial artist relation doesn't need to be always ideal or happy. It has to be like any other working condition. But it's true that we are in a very specific field in which affects, passion, desire, ideas, and personal work get very much engaged and can be even compromised, jeopardized, or bloom together. So how do you actually negotiate, both of you, with emotions, affects, and those frictions actually in your daily life work?
I think it's a super good question because nobody teaches us how to deal with that, and we all deal with that, right? I don't know, how I deal with it, I tend to work with people that I connect, I mean, conceptually, work manners, but also usually personally. I mean, in the long term, doesn't have to be, can be maybe just one project, but that is very important for me. I think there is something in the process that is, if not, become kind of too difficult.
I mean, it goes back a little bit to the question that this person asked about how education sits in certain institutions. For me, if I'm not learning from an artist in a context and an audience, it's not interesting. Sometimes learning's hard, and sometimes it's really pleasurable. But making sure that there's something that benefits both parties, which sounds really easy, but is not so easy all the time.
No. Yeah, and that has different degrees too. I mean, sometimes.
There's another question which we have to, I think, figure it out together. It's by Ralu Ella, and she's asking, what made you to be part of this work? But I think like maybe Ralu can describe it further. Or if there's any question from the audience here, maybe we can take that. There's another question by Barbara Epalza, asking how long does it took to curate the exhibition?
How long?
Yeah.
That's always interesting too. So I guess we've been working on the show for 2.5 years, and there's fits and starts. So when we first got, I like to say it was a blind date that went well. I spent quite a bit of time together just getting to know the work and getting to know the context. I came to Bilbao pretty early on in that moment to see the space and for us to talk about the parameters. Then we did a lot of work with projects and Ken. 2.5 years is the answer, but there were very concentrated periods within that of a lot of dedicated work and thinking. And then we all have other projects, so you dip in and out of this one.
Yeah, definitely.
There's another question by Carla Crespo. She's asking, what's the most difficult part of being a curator, knowing the exhibition or knowing the artist?
It depends on the artist.
I'm not going to answer.
I tend to work, again, because of the context that I inhabit, with artists over a lot of time. I run a residency program, and so it's not about usually just hanging a show and sort of walking away. Usually it's about something that's activated over months. Usually the artist is working with the community. Sometimes you get to know things about people you wish you didn't know. And so you have to separate your relationship with an artist practice and with an artist. I definitely have had my heart broken a few times when you learn that you like the work less because you like the person less. So sometimes, I mean, I'm being funny, but in a way there is this kind of question about where the work ends and the person begins.
It's what we're talking about the affects. It's super important.
I mean, it could go to you too about, I mean, it's the same. Is it, for you, an exhibition and an artwork, how do you think about those as separate entities?
What do you mean, like?
When you're working with a curator, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know if I understand what your question is. I mean, how do you?
Maybe there's another. I was just trying to see if you had an answer for that as well.
No, I mean.
Well, if not, we have two other questions by Raluela. She's asking, do you think a place can have something to make an artist improve its skills just by living there and seeing what's around him or her? And the second question would be, in which way a curator can be a part of the development of an art in a country, of an art scene? So maybe you can ask for the first question about how does the place affect your work? Living in a place or another. You took the decision, you are from here, from Bilbao, and you took the decision to move to New York. How has that decision affected your career?
I mean, I think it really affect me like anything, right? But yeah, has probably allowed me to work there and in other places. It had like more mobility. And I think maybe that specifically related with my practice in the context of like how I work with different communities or even two specific projects that happen here take place in different locations, like precisely because the project is asking for that, like in the making of the movie in different locations. So that, I mean, it's time I go to a context, I actually work with local, like producers, so it's totally embedded in the project. So it's something that I still find fascinating, that how something can mean something different in the context, and I work with that. I definitely work with that aspect.
So how do you think as curators develop the art scene in a country or in a specific region or geography?
I think that's a great question. I mean, I think artists are often asked to come in and sort of drop into a scene and respond to it. I think curators can actually really nurture, I mean, it's back to the local and global question a little bit. Think about what's happening in a place and what is needed by an immediate kind of community within an institution or within a neighborhood or within a scene even, and listen to that and think about it. I mean, it's interesting too to imagine that I think some people think that art has to be brought to a culture, and usually the fact is that culture has already a lot embedded in it. So I think getting rid of the expectation that somehow you're delivering something that's a deficit, and I think that that's a mode of curating that I find not so interesting, but looking for what's already there, and then figuring out ways to make it more visible and to give it more resources. My main job, I feel like, is allocating resources in a smart way.
That's a very good description. I agree. So let's start taking the last questions from the online audience. Paul Long asks, aside from the obviousness of the example of this live broadcasting event, in what ways do you think social media is impacting in art, the artist, or the art world itself?
It's
a tough one.
They're good questions. I think people, I've noticed, come to museums, and like any other event, they're just taking pictures rather than looking. There's a lot of selfies happening in museums, and I can, like, literally people are running into artwork. Like, a lot of new art damage is happening because people are running into sculptures. It's actually true.
That's the first impact.
And I guess on the one hand, I'm not anti-technology by any means, but I think we're in a moment where people are so enamored of looking through a lens at something else that they may not be looking at the thing itself. So I think our job right now is to figure out things like this, actually, which this is a group of great questions coming at us from people. The great part about technology is I'm from an area of the world where I didn't have access to art, and I could only find it through reading. So it's wonderful to see this kind of engagement. On the other hand, I feel like it's still really important to see something in kind of material form when you can.
Yeah, I think what Johanna said, and I think it's just a reflection of what is happening in society, you know? It's a matter of seeing how far can we get and acknowledging that aspect, not getting lost into it, like breaking the peace, or just like, I don't know, posting about whatever without leaving the experience, actually, you know? So,
One of the last questions posted is by Yolanda Goitia Martinez, who's asking where is the difficulty into syncing the work between the curator and the artist, no? Do you have, both of you, the same point of view or the same idea, or where are the conflicts and the frictions? And how this can be productive, actually?
Well, it has been pretty much like a nice dialogue so far, and I think we ended up like having the product right now. But I think it's, as Johanna was pointing out before, for me it was a matter of like trust. Sometimes I will trust her if she has a strong opinion. Sometimes she did that with me, and surprising each other in that process, no?
I mean, I think this question and others have pointed to the fact that people still are unresolved in what curators do.
Yeah, maybe it's that.
Etymologically, it just means to take to care for. And obviously, when you're talking about old work, that's about conservation. But I think it's really interesting that people still have a lot of different ideas. Am I supposed to convince you of the best way for your work to look, or am I there just to facilitate and help make it happen? And I think, from my part, again, I have a very political, like a very overtly political way of working, which is to get behind certain kinds of artists and practices and to make sure that they're visible and they're articulated. And so it's about, in a way, visibility and resource allotment, but also sometimes I think also pulling back an artist from what they think they see and just allowing a second point of view to be there.
Yeah, I think in this process you always wanted to make sure that was clear, the exhibition, but also what we're talking, in that sense.
No, it's true. With Itziar, and once in a while I would just say, like, why are you doing that?
Yeah.
Just if there's a reason for it.
Yeah, and you were obsessing about that. Like, it's always about the reason, and I am, but she was over obsessing about the reason for everything. So that is what's
it's probably annoying, but it's worth
no, it's great.
And this is, I think, the last question we can take because we're running out of time. But Andrea Arana is asking, do you build an exhibition based on an idea, or do you improvise as long as you're creating it?
Well, I think it can be both ways, but depends. Sometimes, an exhibition is an invitation, right? And then you make that happen. But I don't know if the question is referring to this occasion or this situation, but in this case, we actually formulated the entire exhibition and made it up. Like, the idea was to have something here, and we kind of came up with the projects that will be, involved, and even the new production. There are some new projects and aspects. So,
I mean, I work differently if I'm doing a monographic project or if I'm doing a group show. I'm actually, I think it's really unpopular to do argument-driven shows, but that's mostly what I do when I do group shows. And those are arguments that are meant to be sort of didactic, but also very open-ended and to be speculative. But they usually are quite heavily thematic, which I find really interesting to do right now.
So thank you so much to both of you for your time, your contribution, and your generous participation. Thank you everyone also online here present for your questions and your engagement in this conversation. The next online dialogue on the work of art will happen in May 2018 in the Liechtenstein National Museum, and it will engage with issues around music, programming, and the city. So we look forward to seeing you again there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.